Hello. Hello, everyone.
Okay, hello everyone. Today here we have the real first session of our training from professional writers. Only now we can admit, like me and Natalie, that yesterday here there was a great accident, which just and miscommunication because of the time difference,
Yeah.
yeah, we just planned on different time. But Natalie, yesterday we had a great time because we worked in the breakout rooms and decided on the final product of
Oh, cool.
our sessions. I introduced your playlist and
Awesome.
yeah, and now we are really happy to introduce Natalie Sea. It's
Hi.
so with Olena Halapchuk-Ternavska, we already met Natalie, and the plan was to start this series even last year, last academic year. But due to the power shortages, due to the blackouts and all the problems, we really were not able to do it. So now I give floor to Natalie. Please meet Natalie. Natalie, the floor is
Hi. You just want me to introduce myself? I'm Natalie. I have been writing since before I could even hold a pen, I would just tell my mom stories and I'd be like, Mom, write this down. So I've been writing pretty much forever. And back in May of 2021, I started my channel to start teaching people how to write. It was earlier that year that I had begun to write professionally for clients. And nowadays I write, I have a published book. I still make, the occasional YouTube video, and I coach writers and I edit other people's novels. So that's kind of the scope of everything that I have done and am doing. It is awesome to meet all of you.
thank you.
Yeah. Do you want me to say more? Am I introducing?
No, no, no.
Okay.
You may just start here. So, because yesterday I talked a lot about you, like how I met you, about your channel, about yeah.
Yes.
But you can just start talking, and you can also tell about the schedule when people will be allowed to ask questions during
Okay.
whole session or from the very beginning. The playlist, they already have it, but we can still introduce it and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me pull up that playlist actually. Um, because I did design it to hopefully be super helpful to introduce you guys to the writing process. So this first video on this playlist is called Are You Really a Writer? And I made this video in response to an article that I saw that was like 7 things that mean you're born to be a writer. And I was like, I don't believe in this. I don't have all 7 of these things. Probably a lot of people don't have all 7 of these things. So I just made that video to say to whoever wants to write that it's okay if there are certain traits that you think writers should have or that other people say writers should have that you don't have. You can be a writer as long as you want to write. So that's kind of what that video goes into. And I hope that gives you guys a good introduction into um, why you can write whatever you want and not let anything stop you. And then the second video is my best advice for beginner writers. And this just goes into some good things to understand before you, not even necessarily before you go into the process, but just to understand as a beginner. Things like to go easy on yourself and to trust your gut and not, depend too much on outside advice and all of that stuff. And then my third video is my most popular video. Oh, thank you for the link, Marina. So my third video on there is my most popular video on the channel, and it's about the story circle. And the story circle is a plot device created by Dan Harmon, who wrote Community and Rick and Morty. And so he created this story circle. It's kind of like the hero's journey, but it's a little bit simpler. And it's a great tool to plot a story or a narrative. and to kind of make sure that it's character driven and that readers are going to care about it. And then my fourth video is about developing your characters, understanding their personality types. The Enneagram is a really cool typing system that I love and allows you to really understand your character's motivations and who they are, and some behaviors as well, and all of that stuff. So, yes, awesome, beautiful. Okay, and then video 5, intro to the 4-act plot structure. This way I don't have to keep looking down at my phone. Intro to the 4-act plot structure, it's another plotting device, kind of similar to the story circle. You can kind of use them in tandem with each other, but the 4-act plot structure goes into story beats. Things like, your setup, your um, midpoint, your climax, your resolution, beats like that you see in a lot of stories. Um, that goes into that. And then number 6, the secret to writing good scenes, goes into how to write a not necessarily an action scene, but 6 and 7 go into scenes and sequels. And scenes is where your characters are acting and things are happening. And sequels are where your characters respond and recover to what just happened in the previous scene, and they make a new plan, which launches them into a new scene. So, using scenes and sequels allows you to have moments of intensity and moments of rest that creates contrast in your story. So, those two videos are about using those together. And then video number 7, the hidden power, or no, I already talked about that. Video 8, motivation reaction units. This video is about going into the motivation reaction unit. Talks about how a motivation happens to a character and then they react, and it's kind of breaking down your story on a molecular level to go into, are they reacting in the way that a normal human would react, which is that we take in the motivation and we process it emotionally and then mentally, and then we speak and move. And if things are happening out of that order, it can make it feel strange. If the MRU is too thin and we're not adding description or character in there, then it can fall a little bit flat. So knowing about those, they're usually more of like okay, I wrote my story and now I'm going to go back and revise, and I'm going to make sure that my MRUs are looking good. And that can really take your story to the next level. Then video 9 is how to write thrilling suspense. And I love this video, such a fun video. Suspense, even if you're not writing like a thriller or a mystery or a crime novel or anything that you would think should be suspenseful, suspense exists in every story. It's just, basically putting questions in your reader's mind, hinting at things, and the questions kind of hang from the ceiling. And the reader's like, okay, when are we gonna answer those, like, the whole time, and it keeps that kind of feeling going.
Там
Then
можно опять
fantastic
если хочешь.
Тихо, тихо, не
fantastic tropes. With these 5 tips, tropes can turn into cliches. So, if you're not careful with how you use a trope, tropes are in every story. Readers love tropes. Every genre, like if you choose to write a fantasy or if you choose to write a romance, there's gonna be associated tropes that people are like, "Ooh, I love this." Like, in a romance, a love triangle is a very common trope. In a fantasy, the chosen one is a common trope, like in Harry Potter, where Harry Potter is the chosen one that's going to save the world. So people love these tropes, but if you don't do it right, it can turn into a cliche that feels overused, overdone, kind of cheesy. So that video is just about how to kind of use tropes and things that your readers love to your advantage and make sure that they feel unique and fresh in your story. And then now video 11, number 11, point of view, is all about understanding who your character is and where they come from, so that when you are describing things in your story, you're saying two characters enter a room and these characters are vastly different people, so they're going to notice different things in the room, or they're going to respond differently to the room. And understanding that in the point of view that you write your story in is going to just make it feel very, like I said, fresh, very like in the character's perspective. We're going to feel like we're there with the character experiencing the world, which is the goal. The goal of story, I think, my YouTube channel is stories that transport you is my little motto. And the best way to do that is to really make readers feel like they are stepping into the character's skin and they are stepping into this world when you write a story. And that includes for, I don't know if you guys are writing more nonfiction or like personal narratives, but that includes those as well. It includes nonfiction and fiction. And then video 12 is, should you really cut that scene? This is about deciding what to slash and what to save when you're editing, but also sometimes when you go into the process of writing, there can be certain scenes that you are like, I don't know if I should include that. I don't know if it's going to matter or, if people are going to care about this scene or if it's going to help the story at all. So that video is just about deciding um, if that scene is actually going to be useful because a lot of people are very ruthless when they're like, when you're editing, you should cut a scene that has this and this and this. If it doesn't, if it doesn't have action, if it's not interesting, if it feels like slower, you should cut it out. Which I super disagree with. So that scene just goes into that or that video goes into that concept. So yeah, hopefully this playlist should take you through kind of a natural flow of, you know, understanding that you're a writer, knowing how to get into the process, developing your plot and your characters, and then kind of going into a little bit more of plot structure and then into some editing. And yeah, it should hopefully take you through the process in a well-rounded way, is the goal. So,
Thank you. And Elizaveta,
yeah.
just a second, because Natalie's playlist brings us to our projects. After watching the videos, you will learn more about the steps that a writer takes. And our final projects, which will be on the 24th of October, will probably reflect what we have learned from this. Okay, thank you. Elizaveta, please.
Hi, Natalie.
Yeah, hi.
I wanted to ask sort of how this webinar will sort of go, because I already have some questions for you, but I don't want to sort of interrupt your plans. So I wanted to ask like how you're going to conduct this.
I'm open to just kind of have it flexible and flowing. Like if Marina wants me to introduce more stuff or talk about more stuff in relation to the course we can, I am willing to take questions whenever, because I'm excited to talk to you guys as well. So whatever, Marina, how do you feel?
My feeling is that the videos, I have watched all of them, they already have the structure and they present everything that Natalie is doing. Like this is a really good gist. So we can ask her questions now because we never have time for questions. Like yesterday, we talked for an hour because we never have time for talking. And yesterday we had this chance. So my feeling is yes, because I also have a couple of questions here.
Okay.
So please start, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
It's not, it's good if you're not just lecturing, because everything is in your videos. We will watch the videos and we will know. But it's always interesting how a writer thinks, what makes you to be a writer. Like, okay, I stop with my questions and give floor to Elizaveta, please.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to sort of lead with that I can sort of relate. I've also been writing pretty much my whole life. I'm not like a professional or anything. I'm just, I just write in my free time, whatever I like.
Awesome.
I wanted to ask maybe like a piece of advice as someone who has published a whole book. I always sort of have this problem where I start writing, like I start working on an idea that I had, and I never really get very far. Like most of my work are like 1-2 pages. I think my biggest work was 5 pages. I mean 5 A4 pages. And recently I started sort of trying to develop a script for a animated TV show that I have an idea for.
Oh,
And I like decided, okay, I will plan this out instead of just starting writing from somewhere from the beginning. I will like write out a plan.
yeah.
And I'm still like feeling really stuck because like I start writing things down and then I get new ideas and I have to write those ideas down. And it's all so much. So like I
Yeah.
wanted to ask if you maybe have any advice for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first piece of advice is always to begin with the end in mind.
Mhm.
So if you're able to kind of at least plot the bigger pieces, like, here's the beginning, middle, and end. I want something like at the beginning, I want my character to be this way. In the middle, they're going to have something happen to them that really changes their perspective on things and kind of makes them a more active participant in whatever they're going through. And by the end, they're going to be different in this way. So, knowing those big pieces and also understanding the message that you want people to walk away with. So, there's kind of a lot of pieces, but along with theme, we want to know what our character wants, is afraid of, kind of what they're going towards and what they're running from, and you want to create this kind of conflict in your character. So if and video 4, the Enneagram video, we'll go into that a lot more, but understanding your character and the direction of your story and what you're trying to teach with your story, I think are the biggest things for sure. And then you can play with it. Like if you prefer to write shorter stories, my book that I published, I've written novels, I've written long, long books, but the one that I published is a collection of 5 short stories. So each character has 5 to 8 chapters, and it was just really short. I was just like, I have a few scenes that I know I want this character to go through, and I'm gonna kind of weave them together in a meaningful way. So you can also explore with what sort of story works best for you. And then beyond that, if you feel like you have all those things on lock and you're feeling stuck, I would say just sit down and start writing.
Mhm.
And you can even write about what you want to write about. You can be like, this is going to be a script about this, and this show is going to go into this, and my character feels this way. And just kind of like a journal entry, like you're talking to yourself. I know some writers like to kind of go for walks and talk into their phones and just
Mhm.
record a stream of consciousness kind of thing. So at that point, if you feel like you have everything nailed down, it's about just kind of getting your butt in the chair and just like, it's hard. It's, whittling away at the blank page, but you've got this.
Yeah, it's like the worst feeling ever to like sit down and realize that like I love writing. I have written before, but just beginning is so difficult. And I know that I will be happy when I finish this, but I have to start it
Yes.
first.
Yes, and if you want, if it's a thing about maybe you're stuck at the start, you don't have to um be governed by the timeline of your story. Some writers, I don't personally do this, but some writers really love to write whatever scene is most exciting to them at the time. So
Mhm.
like if you have an idea for a scene that's just right in the middle, you can write that first if it's what you're most excited about. And then you can fill in everything else later because that's what editing is for.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
yeah, of course. Thanks for the question.
May I, because
Yeah.
from your videos about, and I strongly recommend this video about the Enneagram. Yeah, it's when you see a person and this person is a character. Yeah, the character usually has his or her fears. Yeah, and these fears they are caused by the background of the character. It's like there is
Yeah.
a person and you have your fears. And
Yes.
in the course of the narrative, you have to overcome your fears. Or we're
Hmm.
interested or we relate to a character. If the character overcomes the fears and comes to this different from point A to point B.
Hmm.
It is so simple, but no one teaches it at Ukrainian universities. Probably
Mm,
I haven't taken a writing course, but for me it was very eye-opening. And now I'm trying to analyze every character, like what sort of fears does he or she have?
yeah,
So how do I relate to this person? How do these fears relate to me? How do you understand? Maybe I have similar problems. What is
yeah,
background? What in my childhood or what kind of trauma caused this? And
right.
then what are the events that will help to overcome these problems? And
Yes.
this is so fascinating because if you do this, when you can then analyze any film, any just written thing much
Yeah.
better, because you understand how it is written and why we relate to this character, why this character is or becomes a part of what interests us. And like for
Yeah.
me, that was really new. And thank you for this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big thing. And I think that I've heard quite a few people say that, like, oh, my degree didn't even teach me that, because I think that we just storytelling is so focused on what's the plot? What's exciting? What's going to happen that everyone's going to be like, "Oh my gosh, that was crazy." But nothing in the plot matters if it doesn't matter to the character that's experiencing it. And you'll find really quickly that if you're watching a show or reading a book where the character is not struggling or is very 2D, you're just not going to care. You're going to be like, I can, stop watching this or reading this anytime. And that really is the difference between like a story. I say it's the difference between a story that you just reread it and you're like, okay, cool, or you read it and it sticks in your brain for a while and you continue to think about it long after you're done reading it, is because the events are tailored in the story for the character to overcome what they fear. And that's a really cool tool also because it means that you don't have to worry about if your character is likable. You don't have to worry about them being perfect or appealing. As long as they are relatable, your audience will care. So I think that's a huge concept. And then, another big part of that on the opposite side is having something that they want and having a direction. And usually, it's different. And the Story Circle video goes into this, but what they want is different from what they actually need, but they think that they need it. And so they are just running towards that the whole time. And it really propels the story. So having that character development in there is crucial for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Because for me, it was like I learned about it half a year ago. Yeah. And now I'm analyzing everyone. Like
Yeah.
I'm taking the film and I keep thinking, okay, what are the fears? What caused those fears? What in the childhood? Because very often we have these flashbacks when we understand that the fears were caused by somebody or something. Yeah, an
Absolutely.
event. Yeah, and then you trace how the character overcomes this, and it's much better than when we think of someone likable. Yeah, so or creating a person that everyone will like. No, it doesn't work now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you relate to the character, it's much more interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And playing on that fear can be so cool. In Burnish, I have one of my characters, her fear is as simple as Burnish is a very deep fantasy, and this character goes to do an apprenticeship under a woman called the Enchantress. And her whole fear is that she comes back and she learns that the Enchantress is actually evil. And so now she's just afraid the entire time that the Enchantress is going to come find her and the prince that she fell in love with and her daughter in the future. And that whole that just that one seed of fear grows into her being like kind of this monstrous. So it's interesting because in a positive arc, you can say, what happens to my character to overcome this fear? Or if you want to go in a negative arc and you want to write the backstory of a villain, or you just want to write kind of a tragic sort of story, you can say, what happens to my character that makes them succumb to this fear and believe that this fear is true? And it just, all you need is that one little thing. She's afraid that the enchantress is going to come find her, and it just snowballs into all kinds of stuff. So it's a really great point to know for sure and to use.
Yeah, and here, you also mentioned that there are 2 or 3 types of arcs. Yeah, so positive arc when you overcome your fear, negative arc when you don't, and also flat, or I don't remember the term, like when nothing happens, when the character when the character remains the same.
Yeah, I don't have as much experience writing characters that remain the same, but I think that's really common in secondary and tertiary characters, where the main character is going through this very big change, and these events can be impacting the characters around them, but the characters around them aren't necessarily transforming in the same way, but it can still bring stuff up for the other characters, and we can go into what's happened to the other characters, but it doesn't change them in the same way. And you were also talking about backstory. I know lots and lots of writers, and I have been known to do this on occasion. Lots and lots of writers will write out. It's good to know at least where this fear and the desire as well came from, because usually they're created at the same time. Like if this character has a fear of like, I know I'm worthless deep down, and if I don't prove myself, everyone's going to leave me. At the same time, the desire is created to always shine and to always be the best, most successful person in the room. So it's good to at least know where that comes from, but I know a lot of writers that also enjoy writing that and going into that backstory and really getting into that headspace of when that happened to the character, and you can do that for every character. So that backstory is a very important piece as well.
Yeah, and here is a comment again. You know the Disney movies, because
Yes.
I kept Googling this part. Yeah, so if you have fears and desires, why Disney cartoons are so catchy? Because the main character reveals the main fear, the main desire, and even the background for this in the first 5 minutes. And
Yes.
if you analyze all Disney cartoons, all Disney stories, so it is built on the same, on the same scheme. You learn about Rapunzel, why she's there, so what is her desire, what her fears are, and what is the background story for this. And it really helps you to relate to the character. And that is how the movie becomes really catchy for us.
Yeah, and you can do something similar because the first 5 minutes of your story is technically, it's going to be kind of the first chapter. And so in the first chapter, you don't necessarily always have to go into the past. You totally can. But if you can have a very clear display of what they're afraid of and what they want somehow, some mention of it, and you can mention what happened in the past as well. You don't necessarily have to show it, but you can kind of allude to it. But helping readers understand in the first 5 minutes why they're here and why they should care about this character. And those first 5 minutes are also, that first chapter is also a promise to your audience of, hey, this is kind of the tone of the story. This is the vibe of the story. This is the character you're going to be with. This is how it's going to go. This is what it's going to be like. So, yeah.
One more question.
Interesting.
That's my
Yeah.
last question. Yeah. So about mood swings, I mean, not the mood swings of a character, but the events go this way here, so that the reader has constant mood swings. And that is how the reader is caught. because
Yes.
so could you comment on this? Because again, when I learned about this, I keep tracing the mood swings in films. Yeah, one moment you are happy for the character, and then you are frustrated, and then you feel excited about something, and that's how it goes. And with the mood swings, they like keep you attracted also. Yeah, could you please comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all about creating moments of victory and moments of failure for sure. Um, a really good way to do this is the scenes and sequels, where in a scene you can have it go really well, and the sequel is like celebration and, kind of reflecting on that, or you can have the scene go really poorly and the sequel is like recovering from that. Scenes are a great place for all that action, and sequels are a great place for all the character bonding and all of that stuff. But if you also look at the four-act plot structure, we can understand where we have like pinch points, which pinch points are where we realize that the bad guy is still a thing and the bad guy is still coming for us, right? And so we can have real low, like kind of scary, just tense moments at those pinch points. And then um, the four-act structure kind of goes in a little bit of a curvy type thing like that. Like we have, pinch point, then we have midpoint, and the midpoint might be a low or a high, and then we have the pinch point again, and then we have the dark night, and that's where the character's questioning everything and everything's falling apart, and that's a real low moment, and that goes right into the climax. So it's really about, I would say, it's about understanding we never want the character to fail too much, but we never want them to succeed too much. We don't want it to be like a down in the dumps, this character's never gonna succeed again, unless it's the disaster point. At that point, you can have them feel like that. But we still want to kind of have the reader hopeful in the character. And then you never want to make them bulletproof. Like in one of my stories, I'm literally writing a robot character, but I still have to find ways for her to kind of lose in her like fight scenes because she's trained in fighting, but I don't want her to be indestructible, right? Because then it's boring. I call it the Superman effect, where Superman in the Justice League, like he enters a fight and you're like, okay, well, I don't even have to watch the rest of this fight because he's about to win, and I can probably just go watch something else because I know how this ends now. So kind of hanging on to that suspenseful feeling of what's about to happen. I'm really rooting for this character. I've seen this character go through some really good and some really hard moments. And I know they're not destructible, but I also have so much hope in the fact that I believe that they can get through this, and kind of cultivating that. And then just understanding the external and internal opportunities that you have to create conflict, because you can have something external swing in and kind of cause some conflict there, or you can have something internal come in and cause conflict, or you can have external and internal things creating more of a that kind of upper feeling with a lighter, more like happy, successful type scene. So all of those things. I feel like that was a really long drawn out answer, but
Yeah,
yeah.
when you start thinking this way, yeah, and I hope it will help Elizaveta, yeah, so that you don't think of the plot, you think of the
Yes,
character, and you think of this transformation, and how do you want your character to transform? And it
exactly.
changes the approach, it changes how you plot your story, and what you do with your story, and it really
Yeah,
helps to plot. But before, you may just like, I'm not a writer, but I'm an observer, and I love observing how people write and how they do this, what are like
yeah.
the midpoints and the pitch points, and
And it gets super easy to, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt for
no,
two
no, no,
seconds.
no, no, it's
It
okay, please.
becomes, I have found, and you probably feel this way too, that it becomes very easy eventually to understand in the first 10, 20 minutes of the movie or the book if you are rooted in the character or not. if this is going to be something where it's like, oh, I'm going to be following a character, and this character is my friend through this experience, and they're my eyes and ears through this experience, or if it's not going to be that way and the character is going to fall flat. You can tell very fast when you start looking for it.
And you know,
So.
we are always hoping like for happy ending, and they will live happily ever after. But when I watched, for example, the Friends reunion, and I also noticed how they said, you know why we wanted to stop here? Because if we continued, there had to be quarrels, there had to be problems, and like you can't continue telling about happy life because no one will relate to this. And yeah, so people tell stories to tell about problems and to tell about their solutions, and this is also a great point. Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite quotes about writing, says something about that. It's like, um, write fast and clear, or maybe hard and clear, about what hurts. And that's what people do. They write about what they're going through, what's hurting them, and even what they went through before, but what they learned. And you might have heard the quote, write what you know, but I say write what you know emotionally. Like, it doesn't have to be that you have lived in this big high fantasy kingdom before. Authors, if you look at big stories, authors have not lived the lives that they are writing, but they have learned whatever message they are conveying now. And I also want to respond to this message in the chat from Olena. Disney cartoons are full of stereotypes. His childhood is reflected in them. I love that comment. That's a really good example of those tropes and how a trope can turn into a cliche. I think that Disney does tropes really well, but there is absolutely that danger of, like, if you don't pull off this trope in this way, it's going to turn into this stereotypical cliche feeling thing. And if that's how you feel about Disney movies, if you disagree with me, that's totally fine. I know some people are very much like, I would so much rather turn on an indie movie that feels much different than watch like this Disney thing. But I definitely do think that I think Disney pulls it off in a way that makes it feel a little less stereotypical than, um, but it also is important to understand that cliches, or not cliche, tropes like that, if they don't become cliches, are kind of a building block. And they're very much expected. If you're writing a certain genre, people are going to go into your story expecting certain tropes. And that doesn't mean you have to do it, but it can be good to kind of Google, like, oh, I'm writing a sci-fi. What are the tropes that people might hope for in this? And to kind of maybe put a spin on it in your own way. So I appreciate that comment, Elena.
Yeah, and so I fully agree with you. Thank you for answering. And so these cartoons are pretty educational. Like I'm just watching them with my students to teach them the linear development of the plot, because they are just, many of them are of the same, just, I couldn't say like outline or schemata, but actually the big plan is the poor girl who is suffering a lot, and so then she's rewarded for that. And so this reward is a man who is like more just richer than she, or just more successful than she. And so that gives like educational activity for adults, like, but for the kids it like gives like stereotypes. And so that is but that is the literature and cartoons and art is for. Just we should think, like, who is that? Is it a flat character, or that is a round character? We couldn't say that the prince is good because he had been dancing with a girl and he hadn't remembered her name for the whole evening. Like, what a stupid guy. And
that's
she's
true.
married.
I never even thought about that.
And so actually, how can you forget the name of the person you had been dancing the whole evening with? Like,
you're so right.
So that is the point. But actually, that teaches a lesson Like, and so on. And Marina was thinking about fears. I'll just add one tiny point. I'm thinking like my approach is conflict. Like, is it the inner conflict of the character, like with him or within him or her? Or is
Yeah.
it the outer conflict? Like, is the main character fighting with the whole world, or just
Yeah.
only with some listed people in the just novel or in this like piece of fiction? And so that is
Yeah.
one of the points. Thank you. Happy to be with you
Yeah.
here. Thank you very much.
Happy to have you. You're so right. That conflict is very, very important. I think that fear and conflict are kind of married, right? You can't have one without the other. If you just have a character who's afraid all the time, then you're like, okay, well, I don't really want to read about this character because they're not doing anything and nothing's happening. They're just in this place of fear the entire time. But if you're just reading about conflict that is just happening to happen, it's like, okay, well, what's the point? So when we put them together, we have conflict that is impacting the character's fear somehow. The external conflict might not always directly impact their fear. Like if their fear is that they like, I don't know. I'll use an example from my story. My robot character is very afraid of being vulnerable and taken advantage of and all that stuff. So she's going on this journey for freedom, but the world is trying to come capture her. She's being hunted by police and by these people who there's a reward on her head. So every external fight that she goes into is to secure her desire of keeping her freedom, and to avoid that fear of going back to the place where she was trapped. And then we also have the internal conflict of her getting close to the man that she's falling in love with and realizing, oh no, I'm becoming vulnerable. I'm scared of this, but I can't stay away from him. And so there's this push and pull feeling. So that conflict there, I absolutely think you should be every scene you should say, what can kind of go wrong here? How can I insert a little conflict into this? So that's a very important concept as well, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, I have also a question about tropes.
Yeah.
A couple of days, just a couple of days ago, I was looking for a story, and I found the story. The story was if I like Mila mentioned it, and I just googled if, for example, if I had known this before, yeah, so something like this. And there is a book which has this title, and I was really, surprised that below the title there were the tropes, like woman. The tropes were like love comes after hatred, or so, and there were 7 tropes, and I thought probably I wouldn't like to read this story if if I saw the tropes. Yeah, like how is it? I mean, what is the marketing in this when you reveal the tropes from the very beginning? Is it okay?
Right.
Yeah.
Was that a nonfiction or was that a fiction?
A fiction.
I'm gonna see. Let me see if I can find it really quick. I'm gonna try and
so
Google it because I want to
find
see.
it. Let me find it because
Yeah.
Okay, Elizaveta, you can ask your question and I will ask.
Yeah, actually, it's not a question. I have an idea for why that might be. I think this trend may have come from fan fiction, because when people post fanfics, they like in the text they usually write all the tropes. Because like with fanfics, people aren't really looking for, like a detective story or a romance story. They're looking for tropes that they enjoy with characters that they enjoy from already existing media. So I think it may have come from there, because in the fanfiction community, you advertise your work almost exclusively by tropes. So, I mean, in my opinion, it doesn't really work as well with original works, because I feel like it's just different, right? Because with fan fiction, you already know the like the original story, and you just want, you just want something more. You just want something that you think would be fun with these characters. But when you're looking for sort of an original work to read, at least I personally, I'm looking for something new, and I pay more attention to the genre. Like, I love detectives, so I will pick up a detective if I like the description, for example. But I have to agree with Marina that if all the tropes are listed, it's kind of anticlimactic, right? Because if I already know that these characters hate each other at first but will fall in love later, then, well, you already spoiled the whole plot.
Yeah. Do you say, tell me if this is correct. Am I saying it right? Is it
You know,
Elizaveta?
interestingly, but I can't find it on my computer. I was
Okay,
searching on
no
my
worries.
phone, yeah, but here I can't find it. But still, I'm sure that there were the tropes listed.
Right.
Yeah, probably that was from Amazon or something else. And I was like,
Am I saying your name right? Is it Elizaveta?
yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, but you can call me Liz.
Okay, okay. All right, so I think Liz is right. I think it's a marketing thing, and I think that um it kind of depends on the genre. Like kind of more dramatic romance, like, I actually work at a bookstore now, and you see them all over the place. Like it'll say the title, and then it'll be like, he'll do anything for her, including blah blah blah. And it's like very like dramatic. And it's like it's designed to draw in a very specific clientele. And so that's a big piece when you look at any cover anywhere is you kind of say what age group, what kind of person is this marketing to? So it's going to be the people who kind of like some people don't enjoy going into with like a certain book unless they know it has what they want. Like some people are like, I only want to read, enemies to lovers romances for the rest of my life. And so having that on there very clearly can be a great selling point, but I think it also, for people who don't want to know that they're about to go into an enemies to lovers trope, is a little bit disappointing. So I see where you're coming from for sure, Marina.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone else have questions? Let's just open it up. Whatever you guys want to
So
ask.
please ask questions because I still have more. You know, I am really interested in how we can teach kids to write and understand narratives. Because in my childhood, I was a bookworm, but I only looked for the plot. I was only interested in the plot. And I see that writing and reading can really develop your emotional literacy if you do it the correct way. If you talk about fears, desires, if you talk about the transformations, and
Yeah.
I even thought that we could develop the list again for the kids, the list of like good character traits or something like values, and illustrate them.
I even use those sometimes. I'm like, give me ideas. So yeah.
Yeah, so like how to be a kinder person, how to be not so mean, but not in the simple ways that I usually use in our schools, like the silly stories that do not relate, that kids don't relate to, but how to do it through the psychological development so that they could relate. And that's so difficult. How did you learn
Yeah.
this? When did you was it at school, or because was it the system of education that made you think so? How did you learn this?
That's a really interesting question. I think it's specific. It's especially hard to teach to kids because kids are self-referencing. And so until a certain point of development, we are the only thing that exists to us. So it's really hard for kids to put themselves in someone else's shoes or imagine that someone else is going through something different. I think from ages 6 to 10 is when that kind of starts to change and develop a little bit. But I think, the kids' stories and movies are a great way of teaching that, but also I can't remember if there was necessarily a focus because I feel like I feel like developing really fleshed out characters and really relying on character for the story is something that I have been learning in the past like 7 years or so. Like before that, it was kind of a newer, like kind of unknown territory. So I think for kids, teaching kids, I think
By
it's just
kids,
a matter.
I mean students as well. I mean just
Oh,
students.
like
Yeah, not
just
only kids. Yeah,
just teaching it in
yeah,
general.
yeah. How to
Just
teach it?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I would say just starting conversation, just kind of asking thought-provoking questions of like, okay, well, if we're writing a story, usually in my coaching sessions, I'll start with, what do you want this story to be about? Like when you read this story, when someone reads this story, what kind of feeling do you want them to walk away from? Like, what are you trying to teach? And then from there, we can go into, okay, or if they have an idea with a character, you can start with these questions, but kind of character building questions of like, how is this character going to be a good vessel to teach this concept? And what do you think this character is going through that's going to resonate with people? And how can we show what they're going through while making that feel natural and not forced? And um, how can we add dimensions to it and make it like a real person going through something and not just like, oh, they have this one conflict and we're just going to talk about only that the whole time. So just kind of um, asking questions that are going to lead them to their answers. And I think that's a big part of teaching writing in general is just letting people realize um, and not telling them the answer, but just kind of leading them down this path of thought that's going to have them come to that conclusion and guiding them through that process. I hope that answers your question.
yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, good.
I would
What's up,
also
Liz?
say, that like you could approach this. I mean, again, I'm not a professional, but I just remembered that when I was in middle school, my friend and I, we well, it all started because we really liked this TV show, and we sort of made characters that were like, hey, look, this is us, but in this TV show. So self-inserts. But
Yeah.
then it just kind of developed into its own universe, and we just kind of discussed it for fun. And we didn't actually have any plot. We just like I just drew some comics from time to time with funny scenes that I thought, would be fitting. But what we actually wrote were these very long and detailed accounts of what every character is like their personality, what they like and what they dislike. Like we were really obsessed with that. We even wrote things like descriptions of specific characters from the perspective of other characters. And I think
Yes.
that's also a really fun exercise, especially if you're teaching kids. So, for example, they can all come up with their characters and then describe other students' characters from their character's point of view or something like that. And also another thing, you could also frame it as like every character is sort of like a hidden story. And you could frame it as, so think about your character, like what they're like, what their personality is like, and try to imagine why. So how they came to be this way, what kind of events shaped their personality this way. And when you
Yes.
start, when you start thinking about that, you start fleshing your character out even more because you start coming up with all of these events, like with their family, with their friends, and then new things spring up, and it's just this constant stream of imagination. It's great. I love it.
Yeah, and I find that if I am stuck, if I'm having writer's block, almost I feel like 90% of the time, if I take a step back, I'm like, oh, I don't know my character yet. Like I haven't fully figured out who I'm embodying when I'm stepping into this story yet. And so that's why I'm feeling like, I can't do it. I really like that exercise. I call it the Great Gatsby of like having other characters describe this other character. It can be a really fun exercise because not only are we pointing out things about that character, but we're also understanding things intrinsically about our character and how they would perceive and how they would describe and what their tone and style is like. So I really like that a lot.
I also wanted to say it's been a real pleasure, but I do unfortunately have to go.
No
Yeah,
worries.
yeah. I just, yeah, you know, I had some
Thank you for
plans.
being here.
Yeah, of
You're
course.
totally good.
Thank you so much. It's been like really, it's been a pleasure, and I really
Yeah.
can't wait to watch your playlist because, yeah, really looking
What a
forward to it.
joy, I tell you.
Okay, I
It's
hope
been
you
nice to
have
meet you.
I hope you have a nice rest of the webinar, and I hope I see
Thank
you
you.
later. Yeah, bye.
Okay.
Yeah, we also
Bye.
hope so. Here, bye-bye.
And Marina, feel free to, if you have everyone's contact information, you can give them my YouTube and my email.
That's
Everyone can have it.
that's what we did yesterday. I
Okay, good.
introduced your YouTube, yeah, and I hope now you will have more followers.
Yeah,
Of course,
and
your
my
videos
email is
are
super
really
easy,
good.
so
Yeah.
thank you. I appreciate that.
You are
So
my
sweet.
hero. Yeah. Okay, so dear colleagues, do you have any questions?
I have time, so
You
go
know,
for
they are
it.
tired, so save this time for us for the last, you know, for when we have this final session.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
maybe by that time they will have, like, we all will have more questions because yeah, so absolutely, Natalia, there will be
For sure.
questions after watching videos. So
Yeah,
and
definitely.
please save this time for us for the moment when we see you again
Deal.
in a month, yeah, and
Okay.
then we'll ask more questions. Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, happy writing, everyone. You've got this. You're all writers, and I believe in your stories. And I'm excited to see what y'all do.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Thank
Of
you,
course.
and we hope to meet you in a month. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I'll see you soon. Everyone stay safe.
yeah. For us, it's really necessary. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I will see you guys soon. Thank you all for being
Thank
here.
you. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Okay.
of course.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone,
Thank you.
for being here today with us. And sorry for yesterday.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks for coming back today.
Yeah, thank you for coming back. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I also, let me stop the recording.